Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey Ronas-Tobin. I'm the Director of Marketing at Co-Strategics, and I'm really excited to welcome you to today's webinar, Frameworks to Drive Digital Innovation. So I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker, my colleague, John Kitson, who's a product strategist at Co-Strategics. John started his career by modernizing operations in the utility industry. But after realizing that he had strength in data analysis, he was promoted to become a change leader overseeing both product development and operations. And after progressing and working at a few different industries, John was hired to work at Co-Strategics because, well, he's a master at merging business and technology needs. So John has a really special talent at bridging the gap between the techies and the business folks who often speak very different languages. And so today, John helps customers, Co-Strategics customers, find value in their data and actualize digital transformation. On a more personal note, John is also the proud father of the cutest one-year-old daughter in the world, and I know because I've seen her on some of our meetings. And he also loves cooking and Imagineering. And if you don't know what Imagineering is, you can ask him after the webinar. Just a couple of notes before we get started. First, please feel free to ask questions. You can just chat your questions and we will get to them. John will get to them at the end of the webinar. Also, yes, we are recording today's webinar. And yes, we will send a link out when it's complete. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John. And John, you can get started.
Thanks, Audrey. Appreciate everyone's time today. I wanted to kind of quickly go over what the agenda is, how we're going to kind of framework this. Wanted to kind of quickly start the webinar by talking through kind of the state of the union. No surprise to anybody. There's been a lot of change and disruption, plenty throughout last year. And we want to first kind of frame the context of the conversation. Why now to be talking through these digital frameworks and digital transformation in general, and how we can help kind of framework that to meet your challenges. So yeah, today when we look at things, COVID's kind of put a damper on a lot of things. Could feel like a perfect storm of things kind of occurring, but it could also be a really neat opportunity. When we looked to put this webinar together, it really came as a response to this current situation we're all in. We're a year into COVID, the light at the end of the tunnel is starting to peak out, and businesses everywhere that we talk to are kind of looking around, trying to assess what to do about it. Without doubt, COVID has changed the ways we're doing things abruptly, significantly, and permanently. Even as we start to see some things starting to come back to normal. When we look at this past year and years to come, what we don't want to have happen is looking back and wondering what if. When we look at these disruptions alongside where both cloud and analytics solutions have been matured to, we really think there's a great opportunity to modernize or transform your systems to be better prepared for tomorrow. And the better you can orient yourself now to this new reality, the more swiftly your team and your organization can succeed. So when we look at what we talk about this analytics revolution, or what the data is, the bar has continued to evolve. Years and years ago, it was financial reporting. It was, how do I look at what has occurred? How to kind of check what's happened in the past. As time has progressed and data has continued to evolve, both in how much data we're capturing, as well as how quickly and wide breadth it can learn from itself, that bar continues to move up the scale. So the market now has enough big data, and as well as data scientists, engineers, and data ops people to really make that data actionable. And as we see this maturity level increase, that decision lag decreases. And that's really where we become very powerful when it comes to analytics. That next trend in data analytics is really that decision intelligence, which is framing a wide range of decision-making techniques. And when we look at where we're at today, that's really where we're at. We've got a lot of things that made us aware of the last year of where we were succeeding or where we were failing. we've got these technologies that are really emerging at a really new world. What we wanted to help you today is really help identify how to quantify that value. It's pretty obvious, what I've stated so far, not news to anybody, but the process of being able to connect that need with the outcome tends to be pretty murky, especially when we move away from tangible product lines and platforms to a lot of digital ones and zeros. According to a Gartner 2021 view from the board of directors, 69% of those surveyed have significantly accelerated their digital business initiatives, and over half of those claim that COVID-19 directly caused some of that increase in those initiatives. What we're really seeing from CEOs is that they may be fully on board for digital transformation, but they're not really able to understand how or why, or even if they are successful. We work daily with clients on workshops to help align, our teams internally and externally, and trying to build that common understanding of value, using these priorities to help, define value, frame the outcomes measured for each digital project that we undertake, with our clients. And I hope you see these through this discussion. But I feel we really can't continue to settle for just measuring digital engagements as being delivered on time and on budget. We really need to measure these outcomes. And these frameworks that we're about to kind of talk through should help orient yourselves around what that definition of value is. On the slide, I identified a few ways that we can, but it really becomes around how do you, each one of these projects, how are you identifying what the outcome is and what you're trying to prioritize with that outcome. The first framework that I want to kind of talk through, I often think it's really the first best place to get started. It's around constructing your organization's kind of current digital transformation framework. You start by looking on one side through those 5 key domains: customer, competitors, innovation, data, and business models. You might have some that are slightly differently named for some of these domains, your systems or your values, for example, but there's these 5 areas that you kind of focus on. You lay those systems out across an axis of what type of system in which they reside. So all of these systems must exist in an enterprise. I just want to kind of call that out. Sometimes when you see something above another, it kind of denotes importance, but it's not really the case here. There are systems of records and there are systems of insights, and they exist, hand in hand. And the goal is laying out the current way so they begin to lay out what the future state might be. When we want to do that, it often helps out to kind of break these systems out by what the intent or what the expectation of that system is. What you're trying to look for as you look to modernize, a current CRM or ERP system is vastly different than what you're looking for when you're looking at your records of insight, how you're currently building your intelligence, or how you're currently interacting with clients through e-commerce websites, or any other kind of mobile or end user facing application. The one key thing that I think is important to point out on this diagram is that we really like to put that bottom area there of culture. That's this little bottom box that we add in. Really tries to capture a lot of the intangible assets around your company's culture. Identifying your own persona to help guide some of these more objective areas is important, so that we understand and you understand kind of how to prioritize and how your appetite for change may impact what you want to see as far as your transformation or modernization journey unfolds. It's a really subjective component there, but I think it really adds an important dimension to your organization. A second framework we use kind of off of a basis of that is our digital strategy canvas, which is a way of exploring your assets and opportunities visually. Whereas that previous framework really applied to your organization as a whole, this one is used more to ideate around digital platforms, digital projects, or products. First, you kind of look at the digital platform or product itself, whether it's new or existing. start with who your customers and users are. What are their changing needs, their demands, their personas, their segments. I think sometimes we'll do this a lot of times with external, products or product lines, but we don't necessarily do this with all of our digital initiatives. And it's really important to really understand who those internal customers are or those internal users are, just as it is for any other product that you're, putting out. When we look at that and you look at the competitive landscape specific to the particular platform or product, are there emerging technologies? When we look at competitors, it's not necessarily, Coke and Pepsi. It's, when you're looking at a competitor to, Tax Turbo or TurboTax, it's pen and paper. The alternative is doing nothing. The alternative is, the status quo. That is a competitor. And understanding what the pros and cons of that in context of this is also really important. And I want to make sure we point out that that is, for internal, it may not be an external, competitor, but there are still competitors to change. When you look at the systems and data, innovation and business models, if you've done the digital transformation framework exercise already, you can already pull from that. But then you want to kind of get business leadership involved to make sure you're aligning your business priorities to that and understanding known challenges. But the hope here, is through roughly about a one-day workshop is what most organizations go through. So you can bring really cross-functional teams together. Data cannot be siloed. Data, and these decisions cannot be siloed. So really trying to gain a holistic view of where things are and what you need to do is really important to bring things together. So we like to walk through this. It's a similar exercise, also usually roughly a one-day workshop. They kind of consist of doing very similar work, but on a data and analytics canvas, very specifically. So we can kind of start with that current operating model and really start asking questions of, what are the data assets that are currently available to you or are relevant and available open source. These are things that are changing, weekly and need to be done with regularity. So even if you've just done this a year ago, the answers to some of these questions may be vastly different today. So that time in which you're performing these exercises is also really important. What are your internal team, data team processes? Do you have a data governance board? How well defined is it? How do you identify data quality? What areas of the business really have stringent controls or needs around data quality, and which ones are a little bit more loose? Setting that prioritization is really important. How do you use technology today to deliver on your organization strategy? Do you? What is that current footprint, and how does it align today? And that kind of hits your operating model. And on the other side of this model is really looking at, those strategic areas. This is, again, vastly important that you bring in leadership for participation and alignment on this, because this kind of helps bring those two areas together. Where you identify who are your key stakeholders, critical priorities across the organization. What is your data strategy? Try to capture that into kind of a vision statement, the same way you would your own mission statements across the organization. Make one specific for data. And then what types of data analytics value propositions are you wanting to focus on? What are those key areas, functional areas there? That combination of the identification of the reality as well as the direction, not directions, but the data direction, I think really allows you to quickly and objectively, identify where your strengths and weaknesses are, captured on this as, your current capabilities and the gaps in your current process. Now that you measured it, you own it. And then we could lay that out into a similar canvas, but geared towards the data. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide. This is kind of, as you go through that exercise, try to lay this out into these canvases, just to kind of become standard expectations for what you'd showcase, and gets the team aligned quickly and structured. So a quick little case study we have on this. We have a client of ours that, as they're looking at what do we do with all of this data, we went through some of these exercises. Where we ended up was, there was the ability to drive new revenue and create new operational efficiencies. They had a need and their clients had a need. Some of the data that they had became extremely valuable to them, and helped make their own, as well as their own customers' decisions a lot easier. So working within financial transactions, that realizing the value of that data allowed them to kind of explore what some new business opportunities were. So by kind of canvassing what data they had available to them, canvassing their customer and the personas that existed, within there, identifying some of their key pain points, they were able to very quickly see that there was a kind of a line drawn between something they have available and something that their customers are actually dealing with, and be able to really identify a new place there. So we help them, seize this opportunity, and monetizing that data. Large scale data engineering, machine learning and data classification, intelligent product APIs, all of that resulted into a new business line that's a multi-million-dollar business line for them. That came out of these first few frameworks of discovery and really finding things that weren't there before. A kind of trimmed down version of this is working through to try to find your digital twins. This isn't a long lost digital twin. There's many types of digital twins. What digital twins are effectively is when you're doing something in the real world, what are the things that kind of go alongside that? And I think it's a really easy way to try to find opportunities for improvement, and especially to find potential MVP versions of things that can go out of real world assets and processes that help add value. So for a field service system that you have, might be monitoring resources to help reduce impacts of repairs, so that they're timed appropriately or that you're allocated appropriately. For planning systems, it might take multiple systems worth of data, and combine that to help optimize scheduling and resource allocation. These digital twins exist throughout your processes. There's often a ton of value just sitting there waiting to be optimized. Very similar concept in some ways, is the idea around doing micro friction analysis. I think it's a very similar exercise in a lot of ways. What you're looking for is your business processes, those things that kind of occur, and identifying things that are often just kind of taken for granted. These like micro friction points that exist throughout process. In lean manufacturing or Toyota way or any of these other processes, you might have different words for it. This phenomenon exists in the digital and data worlds as well. So we often work with customers to do is to plot out, a customer journey and do the detail of identifying all of those moments where, you wish the process was just a little bit faster or a little more automated, just a little more pleasant in general. With the ever-changing world, those friction points, like waiting for an elevator, are things that you're starting to find answers for, and people are then building competitive advantages off of. Newer thermostats know when you're approaching home, so your house is heated and cooled accordingly before you get there. There's new cups now that continue to warm your coffee. microfictions every day are kind of being removed. If you're not looking for them, someone else is. And it's important to be able to find those advantages. So, quick little case study we've got around some of those concepts. Oftentimes when we receive data from third parties, we just kind of expect it to be a part of the cost of doing business. And then there's the product data, and there's all of the other metadata that kind of comes from it. So we had a client who had an issue with that. They work in the produce, market arena, and as they are looking to expand their e-commerce presence, the ability to do so is really much being hampered by poor data quality. And the data quality they were receiving from third-party vendors, the metadata in particular, was just not good. They identified that as something that's hindering their ability to show new products with relevant data and relevant categorization that's needed to be helpful for people who maybe have allergies, or maybe have any number of things where that metadata, more than the name and the price, is really important for them to be able to make informed decisions as to what they're buying. So utilizing third-party metadata and implementing machine learning validation models really help to deliver extreme benefit to the client and to the end user. Seeing 70% faster product listing, with 60% reduction of overall cost in validating the information from there. When you think about all of the people who have allergies, food sensitivities, and special diets, this little bit of data is extremely important, and the ability to deliver on that, especially in a COVID world where that e-commerce processing of shopping really became very important very quickly, was key to success. I want to kind of quickly go from frameworks now, maybe down a little bit level, and it's more of a mindset change. So we've talked through a bunch of canvases. We've talked through different ways you can kind of look through things that exist in your organization. When you start to get into the concept of actually working on it, what does that look like? And I think we've got a shift that needs to occur on our side of shifting from a project mindset to more of a product mindset. And those words are just words. And what I really mean by that is, you can see from the two images. What happens when you finish a race? When you cross that that line, you're done. No one keeps running after that. You're done. You've often ended up, in some cases, right where you started. Projects kind of work very similarly. You have a set, distance you need to go, point A to point B. You do it, you finish it, and then you go home. That works in some areas where things are very well defined, things are concise, it's in, it's out, you don't own it, those kinds of things. But when we think about digital products, when we think about data products, a lot of the harm that's been done in the past is people treating them like projects when they really need to be, part of your strategy, which makes them more products than projects. Projects try to measure delivery, on time and on budget, and products really measure that outcome. It's validation, it's continued growth. It's, trying to deliver something and then continuing to measure it and improve it. One of the analogies that I use is, it's data's, when you're building data, you're not going to build it the same way you'd build a hotel or a bunch of rental properties. You build it the way you build a home. You own it. There's a sense of ownership. So when you're building your teams around this concept, you want people who are going to be invested. You won't want people who are going to be here for a limited period of time and then go back to their day job. You need people to be really invested and feel a sense of ownership of this, and architect and deliver and engineer and think through about the solution in a way that allows them to continue to build, design, iterate, and learn. It's a lot more like this mountaintop analogy. When you're climbing a mountain, you don't know which path you're going to take. Anything can kind of happen, and that unknownness is true with anything kind of worth taking on that's big. You need to continue to adapt. You need to continue to take pauses, look at your new perspective at a newer elevation, and then be able to make changes and decide from there. But no matter where you start, you're going to end up somewhere different. Going along that framework, I think blends directly into push more towards design thinking. We tend to, with digital and data projects in particular, to think more about robots than we do about humans. But I think it's really imperative that these solutions go through a very human-centric design thinking process. At the end of the day, the whole reason we're doing any of these exercises is because it's going to improve someone's life in some way. Making sure that we frame our solutions with a deep understanding and empathy for that end user is key to providing success, rather than just providing a checkbox that says we're done. The key areas in this 5-step process, with continued iterative loops within, that I really want to kind of point out, particular for data projects or digital projects, is on empathize, you really need to have a deep understanding of the job to be done. What emotions are involved, and you're not really looking for bullet points or summaries here. Look for stories. A lot of times people don't understand what's possible. These concepts are foreign to a lot of people. Digital projects and data projects in particular are still very new. You haven't had 20 years of people doing them. So when you're looking for those customer interviews, you really need to do the due diligence of looking deeper. Without that, you're going to miss key insights that are important as you go through the define and ideate sections. And as such, spend as much time as is reasonable to brainstorm and build on others' ideas. The goal is to quickly build, to learn to think. So when you get into that prototype section, I think it's really important here. I find with many teams, especially when we're first going through an engagement, the first release of a product or anything like that, that they don't know what they don't know, we don't know what they don't know, and it's sometimes hard for them to be able to see what's possible when they're kind of buried in the current. The quicker you can get a prototype, the more real it gets. It kind of takes all of this like intangible, data, numbers, things whirling around to, the reality of what this means. And then I think in this industry in particular, I would just want to call that out. It's a place where when we start to work with people, that's where they have the first kind of aha moment. And that's oftentimes where you end up going back to redefine and ideate based off of some of those moments, those things that you kind of get back. That they're able to give you better stories. They're able to help you with that empathy a little bit better than they may have been in that first side. As you're going through that, I've used the term iterative loops a number of times. One of the ones in particular that we wanted to call out is this concept of the OODA loop. OODA stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. It's a popular framework kind of coined by the U.S. military during the Korean War time frame. It was developed by Colonel in the Air Force, John Boyd, who received exemplary marks for his process around outmaneuvering more advanced aircraft that existed out in the field. The whole concept about it is you observe and then quickly orient And the orient part is really the most important section here, because it's really where you take previous experiences and new learnings and all that kind of stuff and really get to the decide and act points quickly. The quicker you can framework and frame yourself around that orientation to then be able to move forward to decide and act, the more prepared, the better you're going to be. I think in the digital terms, a lot of times we'll call it agile or fail fast, but it's all around this idea of being able to kind of take this framework that we have and being able to shrink it down to the smallest amount of time needed to do this, because each one of those iterations, you're smarter each time you kind of come out of that orientation. The last section that we have on here is talking through digital partners. Digital partners are kind of all over the board when it comes to the digital and tech space. These digital partners that I'm looking for in here are a lot less staff aug and a lot more business solutions. So think in the same way you think of CPAs or legal or auditing or any of those kinds of things. There are solutions that use tech tools rather than tech tools. They're business solutions that use tech tools. They're not tech tools. That's what we're building here. We're building business operations. We're not building IT operations. So you launched and need to be able to do certain things. Do you now have a need for full-time employees? Do you have needs for IT consulting? You're looking for a partner who really understands your business. So with that, I want to kind of bring in where co-strategics fits in. As the name implies a little bit, we don't do, not really into the staff aug model. We really are into the idea of, co-aligning around, your internal strategy. We do that with a few different things. This 360-degree view of the team is very strategy focused. The team here spends a ton of time working with clients and really understanding, who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, why, what's out there in the market, what's available. We're not here to try to sell you things. We're really trying to here to solve things with you. And we get just as excited as you do when we find things. We bring product and data analysis, UX analysis, project and Scrum teams, as well as the traditional solution architecture and software and quality engineering to really position ourselves anywhere you need in that digital strategy, help you fulfill that digital strategy of yours. Done 20+ strategy workshops in the past 6 months, really trying to help tackle new challenges and priorities for our clients. We build relationships. We want to see you come to the top of that mountaintop as well. The teams that we provide are very custom fit. So on a previous slide when you just saw, do you need a part of a data scientist and you can't really justify that in your own budget? That's, that team in a box concept is something we really strive with, in building a continued knowledge kind of system for our clients. That plus our kind of across the industry pollination kind of really allows us to pick and choose best of breed or best insights outside of your vertical to help find things that maybe you aren't looking for. And that kind of ends the presentation as is. Any questions wanted to leave some time for any of those.
John, that was really great and very interesting. We did have one question come in, so I'll read that to you here. One thing we struggle with is data quality and data availability. I'm not sure our data is accessible or accurate, and I know it's not trusted. How do you quantify the cost of data quality when you're building a new digital or data product?
Yeah, it's a great question. Could probably talk to that for hours. I think the idea around trust is very important. The definition of trust, I think, depends on who the user is, but ultimately that's some of the frameworks that we talked about at the beginning are really geared towards understanding that. So when you identify who the key customers are, that's really who's defining what trust is. So if that user doesn't trust it, then it's almost as if it's not available. Because what you find very quickly is that they just stop using it. And if they're not using it or it's not available, then it's not there. So the cost is both the cost that you spent trying to do it, as well as the missed opportunity cost of not being able to provide that that to the client or to your internal users. Yeah.
Great. We did just have one other question come through. The question is, you work a lot with data projects. How can you tell if the insights generated will be enough to justify the cost on the other end? In other words, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know that you ever walk into anything with 100% certainty. But a lot of the exercises we walk through try to identify what are those things. So as you're working through the digital canvas or you're working through a data canvas, you're identifying those key, those points. Either they're micro-friction points, they're opportunities to grow new business, or any of those items. When you identify those key pain points, they should be coming from user stories. They should be coming from that empathy, that we talked through in the design thinking. As you identify that gives you that sense of value. The cost to associate is, usually easy to quantify. But the combination of all of these, frameworks and tools to try to orient yourself are to do a few things. One, if you're guessing wrong, be able to fail fast and reorient yourself to what the truth really is. A lot of times what may happen is you have a pain point, but you didn't do your due diligence on identifying, really what was that, that pain point. There's the old adage of, no one needs a drill, they need a hole in the wall. What are the things, how do you really distill down, what actually is needed? And when you're doing that, you should be able to get down to a point of actually providing legit value. When you have deviations from that, it's usually a problem somewhere else, kind of in that cog. You didn't really drill down deep enough. The customer wasn't the real customer. Some of those kinds of situations, occur. But if you utilize the OODA loop and you're failing fast and you're being able to reorient yourself and prototype quickly to get there, the sunk cost is relatively minimal when you're going through those pieces, because you're constantly orient yourself back to true north. So
Great. Well, I think those are all the questions that we have right now. So with that, that ends our webinar. Thank everyone for joining us today. Don't hesitate to reach out afterwards, either to John or myself. And if you have any other questions, have a great rest of your day.